Good morning and welcome to the February 16th, 2023 SBCAG Santa Barbara County Association of Governments meeting. I'm Chair Janelle Osborne. I'd like Madam Clerk to please call roll.
Thank you, Chair Osborne. For the roll call, Director Williams.
Here.
Capps. Hartman.
Here.
Nelson. Here. There he is. Alevanino.
Here.
Infante.
Here.
Julian.
Here.
King. Patino. She's there. I see her. Perotti.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Rouse.
Here.
And Chair Osborne.
Here.
I'm
Thank
here.
you. Oh, that was Alice, I believe.
Yeah,
Director
Patino's
Patino.
here.
Okay, great. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please remind us of Zoom housekeeping before we do the pledge?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm mixing it up. I'm making sure you're all awake and here. I'm making sure you're all awake and here.
Okay. Couple Zoom reminders. For all the panelists, please remember to mute your mic when you're not speaking. If you'd like to comment, please use the raise your hand button. If you're an attendee, you will be in listen-only mode. All attendees will remain in listen-only mode unless unmuted by SBCAG staff to provide public comment. Comments from the public are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. The public will not be able to share their video or screen. When public comment is called on for an agenda item, attendees may use the raise your hand button to express desire to provide public comment for that item, and you'll be unmuted when it's your turn. Those calling in on the phone can dial *9 to raise your hand. Thank you, and those conclude my Zoom reminders.
All righty, now we'll do the pledge. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Item number 3 is public comment. If you have any comments you would like to make on issues not on the agenda, this is the time to do it. Do we have any public comments, Madam Clerk?
Chair Osborne, I have no request for public comment, and I see no attendees requesting public comment.
All right, thank you. We'll move to item 4, which is approval of consent calendar. Madam Clerk, could you read item 4 into the record?
We only read the items that are pulled from
All right,
consent.
no problem. Is there an item that anyone would like to pull?
Madam Chair, if we could do a roll call vote on B2 or 4B.
On 4B, all right. We'll do 4B first.
I will read 4B. 4B, reconsider the circumstances of the COVID state of 19 emergency. 4B1, reconsider the circumstances of the COVID-19 state of emergency. 4B2, consider whether state or local officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing. 4B3, find that the SBCAG board has reconsidered the circumstances of the state of emergency and state or local officials continuing to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing. And 4B4, direct staff to continue to notice and hold hearings as remote hearings consistent with Government Code 54953E3 if requirements can be met or otherwise return to in-person meetings.
I'll move 4B.
May I have a second? All right. Director Perotti seconded that. Roll call vote, please.
Director Williams?
Aye.
Capps?
Aye.
Hartman?
Aye.
Nelson?
No.
Levanino?
Aye.
Infante?
Aye.
Julian?
Aye.
King? Patino?
Aye.
Perotti?
Aye.
Clark? Rouse?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And Chair Osborne?
Aye.
Motion passes 11-1.
Thank you. I'll now entertain a motion for the rest of consent calendar.
So moved.
Did you get that?
Second, Patino.
Nelson and Rouse?
Sure,
Okay.
because there were multiple seconds.
I saw them first. Okay. Let's do roll call vote. Director Williams?
Aye.
Capps? Aye. Hartman?
Aye.
Nelson? Aye. Levanino?
Aye.
Infante?
Aye.
Julian?
Aye.
King? Patino?
Aye.
Perotti?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Rouse?
Aye.
And Chair Osborne.
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0.
All right. To the rest of the directors sitting up here, I have 4 buttons. There are way more than 4 of us, so don't hesitate to let me know you want to speak by saying something, because I might not notice which one of you has actually pushed the button. All right? All right, item 5A.
5A, receive a report on teleconference options and 2023 meeting schedule. 5A1, receive a report on teleconference options and direct staff to notice and hold meetings in person and discuss options for allowing for members to attend via teleconference. 5A2, approve the SBCAG in-person 2023 meeting schedule to update the schedule that was approved in December 2022.
All right.
Madam Chairperson, members of the board, you've heard this presentation a few times now. With all of our committees, we're giving the same presentation, and I think all of them have chosen different options on how to participate. So with the teleconferencing options that we've been using to date, it's under the state of emergency, and so that will no longer apply. We're assuming will no longer apply starting at the end of this month. But if there is a state of an emergency, we could always go back to this type of format, and I would ask for direction from the board. So the options that are before you today are, option 1 was going back to pre-COVID options, where we post the locations of where board members are attending on the agenda. We would need notification that you would like to do that, or each member would need to let us know that they would like to do that, and there would be responsibilities at those locations that as staff we may not be able to accommodate, so we would ask wherever you are having that meeting to provide the staff to accommodate that. It is, we would need to have the location posted on the agenda, posted at the location, accessible to the public, and any materials also accessible to the public at that location. And we need to have all locations have to be able to see and hear, so we'd have to have video capabilities at those locations. And and then we would also need to have a quorum of the board in Santa Barbara County. So if we had everybody on vacation in Paris, you know, in various different locations or wherever, that would not work. But the second option is what we're doing today, is under the current state of emergency. So we're assuming that that option will no longer be available, but it could be resurrected if the state of emergency for other events happens again. And then the third option is a new option where you can participate remotely if there's a reason to do so. And since we meet more than likely less than 10 times a year, you would only be allowed to use that remote option where you didn't have to post your location 2 times per year. So there is a limit to that. And then if we were going to go through that option to allow that to be available to the board members to participate remotely, I would have to have a quorum in 1 location. So those are the parameters, and I'm going to look at Susan. I can't see her eyes if I missed anything. Okay, she's giving me the thumbs up. So in the staff report, it also defines those emergency situations. It's a just cause for childcare or traveling or an illness or physical disability, and emergency circumstances is also defined. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to the chair and the board, and you can discuss what you would like to do and direct staff on how you would like to do it. We also included the calendar. Assuming we're going to go back to in-person, so we'll have a main location every time, and we'll post the location of the other Santa Maria or Santa Barbara, depending on where the main location is, for public testimony to happen at that location like we did before COVID. So I would like the board to adopt that calendar in addition to having their discussion on the options. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for staff? Discussion? Director Nelson.
Chair Osborne, thank you. Quick question on the schedule. I saw that there was, typically we go back and forth, and I saw the February and March or Santa Barbara. I'm sure there's a good explanation, just curious on what it is.
We're trying to coordinate with the Air District, and I'm trying to get back on sync with them because we had that little snafu last month because of the rooms being unavailable. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, Director Nelson, go for it.
I'm actually, even though I've voted against the COVID extension, it's always been about the emergency that I wasn't comfortable with, not the fact that we're doing these meetings by remotely. But I do think the traditional model is something I'm interested in maybe doing, just because it's maybe the most simplest. Some of these have some really crazy requirements that get too complicated. I don't know how that is up there in Sacramento, DOS, but it seems like you probably get a lot of cooks in the kitchen on making some of these things work, and maybe we should just go back to basics. If I understand right, with the back to the traditional model, if any of us are outside the area but still want to participate, we just have to go through the right noticing process and make sure that location is noticed. It is a bigger onus on staff and that commissioner or that director to do that, but I think that still gives us some options out there. And so that's what I'm most comfortable with, but I'm open to anything that anybody else wants to do as well.
I tend to agree with you. The additional work that staff would need to do to track all of our absences, make sure we have a quorum in a single address rather than across the county is stressful as is. And we do, for those of us that have served for a while, we do know the pre-COVID methodology and are comfortable with that. So I support that, but I'm happy to listen to any other concerns or options. Director Williams.
Well, coming to offices is fine for me, but I do believe that the intention of this, though I agree with Supervisor Nelson that a better result for remote meetings could have been achieved. The intention is to remote option, in whatever meeting location we're not actually meeting in. My understanding is as long as we have a quorum in one place, then we're okay.
Director Infante.
Pardon me. One of the things I had offered, because I'm kind of in between the two locations, I can easily, I just found this place. I can easily, now that I know where it is, I can easily go to either location. And I suggested to Ms. Kern that I would be willing to let her tell me which one I need to go to make sure we have a quorum in any one location.
Appreciate that. I am the same as chair. I will always intend to be present at the location that the meeting is occurring, and I appreciate that. I am very pleased to see this option. I am just very concerned about the constraints and the fact that it's only good for about a year, because I think they're still looking at updating it. If I remember right, it's not a permanent solution. It's a bridge while they get more time to evaluate making additional changes. So even this may change, if I remember reading correctly. I see a head nodding from our state lobbyist saying, yes, you are correct. Because I'm like, even this is going to change, right? Because they wanted to accommodate, they weren't sure how, they were still working on Brown Act issues. So this was the temporary fix. So I'm wary to get in the habit of something that's going to change as well, and us constantly having to adapt to those changes. Not that that's not our job, to constantly adapt to change and create change for those around us. So I hear one saying traditional method because it gives us the kinds of flexibility, and if you are going to choose to hold your meeting from home, then you just have to publish your home and let the public in your home, or you could go to your public office or your city hall or county office and open to the public there if you weren't at the Santa Barbara or the Santa Maria. So there's still the option to zoom in from a remote location as long as you're willing to allow the public into that space like we would if we're traveling. Director Williams.
Let me just give you an example. I mean, there is a LoSAN meeting on Monday. On a holiday, right? Our two delegates are myself and Mayor Perotti. It's really not an option for Mayor Perotti. We are both on vacation. I'm going to notice the ski resort that I am at, right? Which is just sort of like a ridiculous thing, right? But if, you know, Mayor Perotti needed to attend from her home, that would not be an option under what is being, you know, what you're proposing. And, you know, we all have spouses or children, and life circumstances change. I think we should, if we think we should have the flexibility with the boards and commissions that we are delegates on, it seemed weird that we wouldn't have the flexibility, like Lausanne, where we wouldn't have the flexibility at our own board.
Before we go to another comment here on the dais, let's go to Director Hartman via Zoom.
My comment was already made, so I don't need to say anything.
All right. Director Nelson.
Well, I would be interested in which direction was her comment being, I mean, who was being made by?
I support simpler, and just wanted to say that I think it is important that the chair be wherever the main meeting is, and like Director Infante, I can go either way to make sure that we have a quorum.
So, as someone who threw out the traditional model initially, I'm a firm believer in that when it's the body that we're directly elected to. So we were having the same conversation about the Board of Supervisors. I'd be really ardent about making sure that we were abiding by strictly kind of the traditional Brown Act. I do sympathize though with all these extra committees that we're on and the responsibilities we have. You know, I've got not only SBCAG and APCD as a supervisor, I've got, you know, through this committee I have Cal Vans, I'm on RCRC, there's PUF governing board, all these different things that we're doing that we get appointed to in their Brown Acted meetings, and so we go to them because they're important responsibilities, but they're not what the voters elected us necessarily to do, or maybe some of them think that's what we're supposed to do, but very few. So I'm a lot more flexible when it comes to these subcommittees, so I would be fine if the will of the board is to move towards something that Director Williams suggests. So pin that out there too.
Well, any other discussion?
Yeah, I'll just add, thank you. I think more flexibility for another year is where I land as well. I mean, just one element is COVID still is out there, other illnesses. If we're not feeling well, we shouldn't be showing up somewhere where people are. And I just think that keeping that in place and allowing that flexibility if need be is helpful.
Any more questions or concerns? If not, I'll entertain a motion. There's two options on the floor.
Madam Chair, so in that second option where there's more flexibility, staff then, is this under that rule that staff then needs to keep track of? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's going to be fun. So there being 11 of us, right? Or 13?
13.
13? All right. So I think as part of the motion, there should be direction that we start an Excel spreadsheet of who's where and what's going on. So, but I don't care either way.
I would also ask, even if it's not part of the motion, that we be very proactive in responding to the requests of where we're going to be attending, how we're attending, and do it as soon as we know so that we help our staff manage this rather than being dependent on them to do all the workload, because we're the ones making that choice. So I don't think it needs to be a part of the motion. I think it's part of our responsibility that choosing that, we're very proactive and respond to the clerk's requests or the director's request. Even if she calls and said, I'm short one person for the quorum and I need you, can you come? And we make every effort to come if we're not the one causing the, I'm out of town or I have an illness and want to Zoom. Are there any concerns online or from our city attorney? I mean,
Actually,
our county.
somebody has their hand raised here.
Okay.
Oh, Director Patino has her
Okay.
hand raised.
Director Patino?
Yes, and I would concur with that. I think it's really important that we be there in person at all the meetings. I think it's important, but also the flexibility. I intended to make today's meeting in person, because I think it's important, but unable to. So I would. That's my preference. Thank you.
And, oh, I know, the reason, and if you say you're gonna be there, then be there. Staff shouldn't have to chase you down when you don't show up. Thank you.
You're getting all kinds of support.
Right for me.
Madam Clerk, you're getting all kinds of support. So I'm happy to entertain a motion. I'm beginning to hear a majority, but to move forward, we need a motion. Director Williams.
I'll move, what's the second option is the one that allows the flexibility?
No, option three.
Option three.
Okay. I'll move option 3.
Option 3. May I have a second? And Director Perotti seconded that. No further discussion. Let's have a roll call vote.
And no public comment either.
Oh, no public comment?
Did you have something?
Madam Chair, can I just make a quick comment for your
Please.
consideration and the directors? Just because you're selecting option 3 doesn't necessarily foreclose your ability to also use a traditional method as well. So I just want to make sure that that's clear when you're directing staff for option 3. You do still have the flexibility for those traditional rules. It's just when a member does use that option 3, as all of you need to be in a single location as a majority. Hopefully that helps.
So as soon as the director or the clerk is aware that one of us is going to be off-site or not able to attend and remoting in, potentially due to health concerns, we need to be notified that that traditional option is no longer the option. We have to have majority in a single location, for clarity. All right.
You can still have, one or two members at that remote location as
As long
well.
as you-
As long as we have 7 of you in the main location. So
That
that main
is-
location's going to be your priority if you can make it to the main location. Thank
All
you.
right. But if none of us are going to be absent, we can use the traditional method and remote in from one of our city councils or community spaces. Okay, as long as we notify it as part of the agenda. Oh, so glad you guys are paying attention and keeping track of all this. All right, we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. We have clarity. We have no public comment?
We do?
We do.
Okay.
And no public comment?
No, and Chair Osborne, no public
All
comment.
right, then roll call vote, please.
Okay, Director Williams,
Aye.
Capps, Hartman,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Lavanino,
Aye.
Infante, Julian,
Aye.
King,
Aye.
Patino,
Aye.
Perotti, Clark,
Aye.
Rouse,
Aye.
and Chair Osborne.
Aye.
Motion passes 13-0.
All right. As we move into the next 2 agenda items, I want to welcome some guests that we have in our audience. We have Ethan Bertrand and Gunnar Lagenhausen. Did I say that correctly? From Greg Hart, Assemblymember Greg Hart's office. We have Stephanie Ramirez Zarate and Carson Link from State Senator Monique Lamont's office. And we have Jesse Abadi from Congressman Salud Carvajal's office with us. So welcome, and thank you for being here to listen to us discuss our legislative platforms. All right, 5B into the record, please.
5B, Draft 2023 Federal Legislative Platform. 5B1, receive a report from SBCAG's federal lobbyist Don Gilchrist of Thomas Walters and Associates. 5B2, approve SBCAG's federal legislative platform for 2023. And 5B3, authorize the SBCAG chair, vice chair, and meeting past chair to participate in legislative advocacy activities in Washington, D.C. the week of March 27th.
All right.
Good morning, Chair Osborne. I'm going to introduce this item before turning it over to Dawn and directors. I'm pleased to bring forward to the board today our draft federal legislative platform for 2023. For background, SBCAG annually adopts a state and federal legislative platform and strategies to assist with our efforts to obtain discretionary funding, both from the state and federal level, for high-priority transportation projects and to influence legislation to protect our interests. With the latter, obtaining discretionary funding being the primary focus for our agency for more than a decade. And this is really rooted in the board's Measure A strategic plan goal to aggressively pursue outside matching funds to deliver on the commitments to voters for the region's transportation needs. The development of the program overall is a collaborative effort with our lobbyists and within SBCAG. our Transportation Technical Advisory Committee, and in consultation with regional partners such as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency's Legislative Roundtable, that's statewide, the Central Coast Coalition, which we'll get more into in our state platform, and other national associations. Today, you'll hear, as our board clerk mentioned, a presentation from our federal lobbyist. You'll consider approval of the platform, and then also authorize the SBCAG chair, vice chair, and immediate past chair to participate in the legislative activities in Washington, D.C. the week of March 27th. Attached to your staff report is the draft 2023 federal legislative platform, which highlights 9 high priority issue areas and corresponding goals and strategies to tackle those issues. Priority issue areas include several funding opportunities, including augmenting existing funding like the Highway Trust Fund, the federal gas tax, and innovative financing. Engaging in regional partnerships and being responsive to passenger rail and transit, climate resiliency, so we're talking EV and clean energy, and commuter tax benefit. Logistically, each platform is in 2 formats. There's a redlined version to visually show you the changes from the previously adopted version, and a clean copy that is easier to read. The Transportation Technical Advisory Committee discussed the platform at their February 2nd meeting and did not have any additional feedback or recommendations for consideration for the board. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Don Gilchrist, president of Thomas Walters and Associates, who implements all legislative and advocacy strategy consulting on behalf of SBCAG. So he's our eyes, ears, and voice in the nation's capital. Don Gilchrist has more than 35 years of experience in the public sector, including 24 years of experience in providing federal legislative advocacy services to local government entities. He is not a stranger to Santa Barbara County. He is a representative of the county as well, which benefits us in a variety of different ways. Prior to joining Thomas Walters and Associates, he served for 11 years on the staff of several members of Congress. And with that, Mr. Gilchrist.
Thank you very much, and Chair Osborne and Board of Directors. For the record, my name is Don Gilchrist. I'm the president of Thomas Walters and Associates, and it's great to see you all again and to have a chance to talk about your federal platform with you. I do want to walk you through the draft platform, but before we do that, I had a few thoughts about the legislative situation that just wanted to walk through with you. If we could, on the first slide here, just to look back at 2022. An interesting year, a very significant year. It was the first year of implementation for the bipartisan infrastructure law. And that was the landmark legislation that was enacted in 2021, which included a 5-year reauthorization of surface transportation programs. That's always a big part of your lobbying effort. That covers highway, transit, rail, and highway safety programs. So getting that reauthorization done as part of this legislation was a very big accomplishment. The bill also provided a significant increase in funding for transportation infrastructure. We saw this in the increase for the formula programs that come down through Department of Transportation. That's the bulk of the money that you will receive from the federal government, but it also increased funding for new and existing grant opportunities. These are competitive grants that you can apply for. So throughout 2022, we worked with your staff to monitor the rollout of these funding opportunities. We're always looking for any opportunities for you, but especially for the Highway 101 multimodal corridor project. SBCAG did apply for funding for that project through 4 of the multimodal programs last year. We were not successful. These programs continue to be very competitive, and so we'll be returning to that in 2023. We did get a lot of good feedback from the Department of Transportation, and we continue to sharpen our approach and hone our applications. One of the really important things that happened last year, though, was the enactment of the appropriations bill. And it's always interesting. This is something that Congress should do every year, but it's always amazing when they actually do it. So it was a good year. They got this enacted into law. And we are very pleased that the legislation added money to these grant programs. This is above and beyond that which was included in the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so this increases the opportunities for you this year as you're applying for funding. But more importantly, Representative Carbajal was able to get a $7 million earmark for you for the 101 project. And Senator Padilla also helped and provided support for this effort. This is actually one of the larger highway project earmarks in the bill, and it really demonstrates Representative Carvajal's effectiveness working on behalf of SBCAG. He and his staff are just great to work with, always responsive to any issues that we bring to them on the federal level. So we're very pleased to see that. I did include the Inflation Reduction Act as a very significant thing that happened last year. This is the budget reconciliation package that included a lot of investment for climate change mitigation, clean energy, renewable energy. And so those are things that we're looking closely at to see if they might be helpful to you as those programs are rolled out. Next slide, please. So for 2023, there's going to continue to be significant opportunities for you, but we do see some new challenges as well. I'm recommending that SBCAG board members and staff travel to Washington, D.C. At the end of March for advocacy meetings, and this will be a chance for you to provide Congress and the administration with your platform, but in particular to lobby for program funding. I think it'll be a good time to be there. The president's budget comes out on March 9th, and so things are going to start to heat up, start to move. It's been a quiet year so far on the federal level, but things are going to start to get moving. We do have divided government, and that means we really don't expect to see the same scale of legislation as we saw with the bipartisan infrastructure law. However, it will be a very important year for implementation of those programs as we move into the second year of these funding opportunities. And our focus again is on the 101, but we're tracking all the programs for any that might be helpful to you. We'll see opportunities in the area of broadband, bridge replacement, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and quite a few more opportunities too. So we'll be looking at those pretty carefully. The House is under Republican control now, and that means that our appropriations process that we go through on an annual basis will be an area of conflict this year. Republicans are going to be seeking to reduce federal spending for a lot of non-defense programs. I don't think that's going to impact the funding that was included in the infrastructure law, but I am watching that very, very carefully. We don't want those programs to be pulled into these debates and conflicts about the annual appropriations bill. I actually think there will be opportunities for us to, once again, add money to some of these programs. And so we're going to zero in on programs that we think might be helpful to you and provide more grant opportunities for you in the appropriations bill. The other issue is, of course, project earmarking, and we do expect that to be something that Congress does again this year. We'll be watching the rollout of the new process and the new guidelines in March and April, and working with our local delegation on that. Looming in the background is this discussion over the debt ceiling. It's not really something that directly impacts your platform, but it can have huge indirect impacts, because if these discussions fall apart, the budget and appropriations process could spin out of control, and who knows where it will lead. So there's no real action for you to take there, but it's something that I keep a very close eye on. So we're looking forward to continuing to work with you, working with your staff to implement the platform that you adopt today. And I would like to walk you through that platform, but maybe I'll pause right there before I do that just to see if there's any questions about the things I've said so far.
Any questions online?
Chair Osborne, no questions on from.
All right.
Well, let's look at the platform. It's very similar to the platform that you adopted last year. There's your goals and objectives carry over to a large degree, but it has been reworked in some ways, and I'll try to walk you through it. Looking at the different issues, issue 1 is federal funding for SBCAG's priority projects. And this is very similar in that we will be seeking federal funds through any federal opportunities for projects, but especially for the US 101 multimodal project. And we do expect to see grant opportunities from the infrastructure law as well as earmarking opportunities in the annual appropriations legislation. Issue 2 is the innovative financing options. And this is important because credit assistance can help lower the costs of implementing projects. Last September, the federal government approved a low-interest TIFIA loan for your 101 project, and the platform just continues supports for these types of programs, as well as seeking to lower those costs that are related to your TIFIA loan. Issue 3 is regional partnerships. And this is also carrying over. We're proposing to continue working with the partners that we have in Santa Barbara County on the shared issues. This will be anything related to Vandenberg. We work with Santa Barbara MTD on transit issues, especially the Small Transit Intensive Cities program. And this year, the countywide broadband strategic plan and the implementation of it is going to be a big opportunity for us to work together. Issue 4 is augment transportation funding sources. This also carries over from last year. It's focused on supporting the long-term solvency for the Highway Trust Fund. This is not in immediate danger, but it's a long-term project that we want to continue to work on because of the importance for transportation programs. Issue 5 is support full implementation of bipartisan infrastructure legislation, and that just reflects the enactment of that bill and how important it is for possibly obtaining as much funding for you as possible. And we'll be working with partners such as the Central Coast Coalition and anybody else that shares our interests to make our advocacy as effective as possible. Issue 6 continues your support for passenger rail. For federal funding that could improve passenger rail on the Central Coast in light of the really significant new resources that were enacted in the infrastructure law. And issue 7, mobility and climate resiliency is also continuing from last year as a part of your platform. There are some new opportunities in this area because of the infrastructure law. I don't think we'll see too much more out of Congress this year, at least on climate change, but we are going to be trying to implement these programs, and that the plank gives us direction to advocate for you. And if anything does become available as Congress looks at future legislation, we'll be able to engage on that. Issue 8 is the tax benefit for commuters that carries over from last year, and issue 9 is pandemic recovery. This is updated to reflect the fact that the big recovery bills are done. Congress enacted them in 2020 and 2021. However, there's some concern about the lingering impact of the pandemic, especially on transit agencies who have not seen their ridership return to the pre-pandemic levels. And so this plank directs us to continue to seek assistance if Congress does turn its attention in that direction. So that's a quick read-through of the platform, and pause there to see if I can provide any additional information for you or answer questions.
Chair.
Yes.
Thanks, Don. Question about number 2. Let me go back to it. The innovative financing options. And not so much on the TIFIA portion, but on the that second bullet point, talking about a National Infrastructure Investment Corporation Act for a national bank. So what, like, I was just trying to do some research on it, but first off, what are the odds of that happening anytime soon? And secondly, how do we finance these projects, these huge projects, without this?
So without the federal government's credit assistance, you do have opportunities available to you through the equivalent of municipal bonds. It's not something that I can speak to in
Right.
detail, but that's essentially a tool that's available to you and anybody else that's doing a big project. Where credit assistance comes in is the federal government has programs that are designed to provide that same loan or credit, but at a lower cost. And so the interest rates are subsidized or held low, lowering the cost for you, freeing up that money for you to do other things with. And so TIFIA is an acronym, and I can never remember. Transportation something, financing
Yes.
something.
I'm sure funding or finance.
It's right on the screen. It's the Federal Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act
Yeah.
that Sarkis knows so well.
And I have
And
to say,
Martha.
your staff was very effective in pursuing this, and it required an enormous amount of their effort. And to see that accomplished last September, it was a huge milestone. I can't take any credit for it other than saying, hey, this program exists, you should look at it. Here's a link that you can check. But I did get to help with a few meetings. So that was great, but we'd like to see that rate lowered if possible. If interest rates go up and down, and so we're exploring that. I don't know how likely that is, to be honest, but it doesn't hurt to ask. As far as the other legislation for an infrastructure bank, they are programs that are somewhat similar but have a different structure. And the National Infrastructure Bank has been proposed for over a decade by different folks. Our own representative did introduce his own version of it, which was considered for inclusion in the bipartisan infrastructure law. It didn't get traction then. I think it involves a lot of the ways that the finance community sees this as a competition. And so we support it. SBCAG supports it because it provides more money, a bigger pool. Everybody benefits. If someone is getting their help through that program, then that helps you when you're going after a grant because they're not competing with you. And so we see this as something to continue to support and work for. I do think Representative Carbajal will be reintroducing his bill. And it's just really most likely just to keep this idea alive and keep it moving forward if there is an opportunity. A bill like this needs to be attached to a larger legislative vehicle if it's going to make it through Congress.
Director Capps.
Chair Osborne, thank you, Mr. Gilchrist. I had a question about item 7, the climate resiliency, and if this is a process question about SBCAG, I was hoping you could walk us through it. Perhaps staff might need to jump in, but really, we have a historic amount of federal funding for climate resiliency, specifically here, transportation. How does SBCAG work to access, as indicated in the goal, access those funds and get them to local entities? I've heard, anecdotally from nonprofits here in town that they can't almost keep up with the potential of what's there. They don't have the staff to write the grants. Is there a role with SBCAG? Just illuminate me on how the process works, given the historic amount of funding, please.
I can best answer the aspects of that question that relate to the legislation and the programs. In terms of the local process, that's a little bit harder for me. Which do you want me to, do you want Lauren to address that aspect, or do you want me to talk about the legislation?
Both would be great. Thank you.
Actually, I was going to invite Sarkis Kachek. He's our director of programming, so very well versed in all the funding elements of our operations. So,
thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lauren. So, Director Capps, the federal formula funding will be flowing to the state. And so then we'll be working with the state through multiple organizations to either receive a formula share or to submit a grant application for competitive funding. So actually right now, the California Transportation Commission has one of those programs. So we're monitoring the guidelines and participating in them. And then if there's a project that we feel like, we'll bring this back to the board. And if there's a project that we feel like the board supports, then we'll develop an application and submit it. We also have been working with the county, Garrett Wong, on some of the programs as well. So we're working closely with the county and letting TTAC know, the technical committee as well, on the opportunity. So some of the money is coming directly to the state, and then there are other federal programs that SBCAG will submit a federal application for.
Thank you. And would you say it's just starting to flow, or?
Yes.
Okay.
So it took a while, and so it's
5
flowing
years.
now. And so we're participating in the guidelines for those.
Great. Well, I look forward to hearing how that actually turns into reality. Thank you.
And I think I would add to that, the Santa Barbara US 101 multimodal corridor project is a project that would be tremendously helpful to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We don't want that fact to be lost in DC when they're looking at projects that are perhaps, what you would consider more traditional climate change projects, whether it's a renewable energy project or what have you. Getting people out of their cars is going to help address climate change. And so that's a big part of this plank, is making sure that that message is carried forward, because it's so important with the Biden administration. They're weighting projects that are seeking funding according to these criteria, which is very different than the previous administration. And so that's part of why this plank is in there, is to give us direction to carry that message forward. We are watching the funding opportunities that are coming out of DC. I just read yesterday that EPA is bringing online their greenhouse gas emissions reduction fund. It's a $27 billion program that came out of the Inflation Reduction Act. I haven't had a chance to look too carefully at it, because yesterday was a travel day, or maybe I'm getting my days mixed up. Anyway, but that's just an example of, wow, we got to take a close look at all these programs in case there's an opportunity there for you. I think at the end of the day, your staff can only do so much, and so zeroing in on the 101 is a good strategy. But there are a few other programs that are very important to you as a board that we are following. We're going to see some stuff come out of DC very soon on the electric vehicle charging infrastructure programs. We'll be working through that with the staff on how they can work with the state, and your state rep lobbyists may have additional comments on that. But some of that money is coming down through the state, but there will be opportunities to apply directly to DC, the Department of Transportation, and we'll be, those are just a few of the examples of things that we'll be watching and trying to get access to.
Thank you. And just to follow on, I know Senator Padilla had a bill, but I believe made it in the Inflation Reduction Act to help transform or transition school buses to electric, especially in places like LA. Kids are sitting in school buses for an hour, 2 hours, inhaling fumes, et cetera. So I'm just curious, again, processy, like how does that funding get to a school district in Santa Barbara County? Would that be through the state? It sounds like that might be happening. I'm just curious in that arena and helping to be that link if at all possible.
Yeah, I will check into that,
Okay.
because as Sarkis said, it depends how it's being allocated.
Okay.
A lot of it is coming down, being allocated through the state, but not all of it. And some of it is grant money, and some of it is other types of incentives. So I'll have to look into that. I don't track that one as closely as I should probably, but it'll be easy for me to run down for you.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair Osborne.
Director Williams, would you still like the mic?
Sure, I had some comments, but I also wanted to Director Caps's question. There is also for schools that are in the 3C territory, which would include the Santa Barbara Unified, if they didn't opt out in the Goleta side of their operations. 3CE has a electrification program for districts in its territory. It can pay for a large share of school bus electrification. So I think one of the first steps you could do if you wanted to connect a district is connect them with 3CE, and my staff can help with that. And most of your jurisdictions are in 3CE, so spread the word. We gave out a good $4.5 million in electrification grants, so something not last year. Santa Barbara County got a larger proportion than we did last year, but it still takes time to spread the word. So our numbers should ultimately be this, similar to a similar size county in Monterey, but it's not quite yet because not all of our people are applying. So whether it's an electric car that a member is doing, or like Carpentry and the county doing electrifying our whole fleet of cars, 3CE can help you with that. My question was on the transit portion of the platform. I just wanted to highlight this. We just got a presentation in both North County Subregional and South County Subregional about the state of our transit ridership, which is coming back up. And so we do have an opportunity to recapture the pre-COVID ridership levels, but getting a big funding hit would really kind of like be a kick in the chin right as we're getting back up. I just want to highlight the importance of that, particularly the MTD funding issue, because I do think that those graphs showed both in the North County services and in the South County services, we have the potential to get back up there, but we're going to need funding to do that.
Madam Clerk, do we have any comments from directors online?
Chair Osmond, there's no directors with their hands raised.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Director Perotti.
First of all, I want to thank Director Capps for that question, because I was curious about school buses as well, because the Goleta Union School District they supply buses to the elementary schools. And I know that they're wanting to transfer over to electric buses, so that was a good question. Thanks for that. I want to highlight that not everybody probably knows the benefits of going to Washington, D.C. In the past, speaking with our legislators or their staff, equally as important, how has that worked in the past? Can you give me just a real quick day, what it looks like for people going to Washington, D.C.? Just out of curiosity, I asked that question. Thank you.
We typically schedule a full day or day and a half. I like to have at least part of a second day to provide flexibility, but essentially you can have a really good day in DC and cover a lot of ground. 2 days is good to have as well. Essentially, we work on the appropriations issues. We work on pending legislation, and we work on administration issues by going to the Department of Transportation and other agencies. It would vary greatly from year to year. As I mentioned, the infrastructure law included a 5-year reauthorization of programs, and so those reauthorization issues are not something that Congress is looking at right now. 2 years ago, that was the main focus of what we were doing, and so that guided who we would meet with and what our focus was, what our priority asks were. But in any case, there will be legislative issues. We'll meet with the committee staff usually. We'll meet with our delegation, Representative Carbajal, the staff for Senator Feinstein, the staff for Senator Padilla, and we'll go to different agencies. We try to connect with the White House, and we had a really good meeting with them last year. We were able to meet with folks at the Department of Commerce last year to talk about their broadband programs. It felt like it felt like we were meeting with the entire department. It was really a helpful meeting for us, I think. And that was just a timely issue because those programs were just starting to come online. So we'll be looking for what's going on right now that we can be part of. And that will vary from year to year.
Thank you for that.
If I may add just one more thing, it's also elevating and raising awareness of this region. So it's providing the visual pictures and the maps and things like that to people who are on the ground making decisions of our $25 million grants or our multi-million-dollar grants that we're doing to the federal government. And it's trying to give them an understanding of what is on the ground when they're not coming out here to visit, right? So Dawn's there every day, but this is an opportunity to elevate our region's profile with our officials. And so people pay attention that way.
Thank you. Any more questions before I entertain a motion? All right, public comment?
Chair Osborne, we have no requests for public comment.
All right, thank you. I'm willing to entertain a motion to accept staff recommendation approving our legislative platform and authorizing the chair, the vice chair, and the immediate past chair to go to DC in week of March 27th.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Director Infante. And Director King seconds. Roll call vote, please.
Director Williams? Aye. Capps? Hartman?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Levanino?
Aye.
Infante?
Aye.
Julian?
Aye.
King?
Aye.
Patino?
Aye.
Perotti?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Rouse?
Aye.
And Chair Osborne.
Aye.
Motion passes 13-0.
All right. We will now move on to item 5C and talk about our state legislative.
Item 5C, Draft 2023 State Legislative Platform. 5C1, receive a report from SBCAG's state lobbyist Gus Corey of Corey Consulting. 5C2, approve SBCAG State Legislative Platform for 2023. 5C3, appoint an SBCAG board delegate to participate in Central Coast Coalition Sacramento advocacy activities on Tuesday, March 14th and Wednesday, March 15th.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Osborne and fellow board members. I am pleased to bring forward our draft state legislative platform. As discussed in the previous item, much of our legislative program and strategies are rooted in the Measure A strategic plan to aggressively pursue outside matching funds to deliver on the commitments to our voters. This is developed collaboratively, as we mentioned. An additional collaboration that we have here in the state is with the California Association of Councils of Governments, among other associations. Today, as board clerk outlined, you're going to hear a presentation from Gus Corey of Corey Consulting. You're going to take action on the legislative platform and appoint a delegate to participate in the Central Coast Coalition Sacramento Day. Attached to your staff report is the draft state platform that highlights 7 high priority issues corresponding with the goals and strategies of those issues. We do try to coordinate with the federal legislative platform, so there's similar readability between the two. You do have 2 versions on your staff report attachment, the red line version to show you the changes from last year, as well as the clean copy. The Transportation Technical Advisory Committee discussed this state legislative platform at their February 2nd meeting. The City of Santa Barbara requested additional language to support the enhancement of roadway safety and prevention of fatalities for drivers, bicyclists, and pedestrians. A strategy for this request was approved and adopted in the 2022 platform, but was inadvertently omitted in the draft 2023 version presented to the advisory committee. So that's been fixed, and the correct version is attached. Also, the committee discussed the active transportation program. So this is of great interest to many of you on this board. This included expressing interest in evaluating opportunities to increase competitive funding for active transportation infrastructure in areas where Assembly Bill 2097, That is the residential, commercial, or other development like the parking requirements legislation. So is applicable, and mitigating the impacts of the oversubscribed active transportation program overall. So SBCAG staff, through the leadership of Sarkis Kodchak, Director of Programming, will work with our local jurisdictions on those topics for the California Transportation Commission workshops to influence the grant guidelines. That's where it makes most sense versus the legislative platform. Additionally, based on historic feedback from that committee, new this year was the addition of housing as an area of interest on a regional basis. So it makes sense for us to continue to advocate for programs to implement our regional transportation plan and sustainable community strategy, and as well as have a strategy related to monitoring the Department of Housing and Community Development for updates to the regional housing need allocation in anticipation of the next cycle for this region to begin in 2029. So Sacramento Day disclaimer before I invite Gus Corey to present. A note about the upcoming Sacramento Day. The Central Coast Coalition, for those of you who are not familiar, is a partnership of 6 metropolitan planning organizations and transportation agencies between Santa Barbara and Santa Cruz. In 2010, the coalition came together with a common goal to highlight how critical the US 101 was on the Central Coast for the economy and to improve transportation investments in our region. So, and the region of the Central Coast. A reminder of just how vital efficient transportation system is in the Central Coast for both the state and the nation. SBCAG is the administrative entity of the coalition. Sarkis Kodchak serves as the chief of staff, and Margie Kern serves as the chair. So the SBCAG board chair and vice chair are not available to participate in this year's Coalition Sacramento Day. Therefore, at the end of Corey's presentation, there is an opportunity for the board to delegate an appointee at your discretion. Due to the size of the group with the coalition in Sacramento, we have historically encouraged a single delegate, but we have and are able to accommodate up to 2 board member participants. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Gus Corey, president of Corey Consulting, who has served as SBCAG's legislative advocate since 2010, helping to deliver generational and transformative funding opportunities to improve multimodal infrastructure and mobility within the county and Central Coast region, particularly along the US 101. Mr. Corey has over 23 years of experience and currently provides legislative advocacy and consulting services for 15 county transportation planning agencies, including the Central Coast Coalition. Corey served as the former lead advocate and legislative director for the California Transit Association and regularly consults on funding for highways and transit programs by Caltrans and the California Transportation Commission. He is often on the ground when important decisions are being made to influence state legislation or to engage state agencies to protect SBCAG's interest. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gus Corey.
Thank you, Lauren. That was a very gracious introduction. Good morning, Director Osborne and directors, or Chair Osborne and directors. Gus Corey, Legislative Advocate. Always a pleasure to be here before you. Don's a hard act to follow, so I'm going to be as economical as possible with my comments. But last year was an incredibly busy year for us. The governor's executive orders with respect to trying to really address climate change consumed a lot of our activity last year. And so before we jump into that, just to kind of give you a level set of where we are with respect to the legislative calendar. So the new class of legislators got sworn in on December 5th. They were in town for the day. They recessed until the beginning of January. I think as everybody knows, we've lost a couple of representatives. We no longer have Assemblymember Bennett, whose district, because of redistricting, moves further south. Assemblymember Cunningham elected not to run for an additional term, and he was redistricted out. And so we have our dynamic duo of Senator Monique Limon and Assemblymember Greg Hart. So very excited to work with them this year. So with respect to last year, the top 3 bills are related to the governor's climate action plan for transportation infrastructure. So in September of 2019, Governor Newsom issued an executive order saying we need to do more to address climate change. And transportation, the transportation sector is responsible for more than 40% of all greenhouse gas emissions that are produced. And so legislators tried on a couple of occasions. AB 1778, for example, was to eliminate any kind of highway capacity projects if there was a census tract of 5,000 or more people along the route, which would have killed our ability to complete the 101 multimodal corridor, the remaining 2.5 mile stretch. And so I did work with the author to try to make that a district bill first, because her intention there was to try to address the disadvantaged communities that live along the 710 corridor, which is right next to the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles, where 40% of all the nation's imports and exports come from. And so she had very good reason for carrying the legislation, but the bill unfortunately passed in the Senate Transportation Committee. The next two bills were authored by the current Assembly Transportation Committee chair. So AB 2237 was incredibly problematic for us, and that's because it would have, for the first time that I've ever seen, it would have been unprecedented for the state to come in and to dictate to you as far as how to prioritize your projects, your Measure A expenditure plan, which you have a fiduciary responsibility to voters in this county. We basically don't make all the decisions. We're beholden to what the voters want to pay for. And so the state would have been able to come in and cherry pick projects that they thought should be funded. And so that bill, and working with the Self-Help Counties Coalition in particular, we were able to defeat that bill. AB 2438 was really difficult for us. This bill speaks to the governor's climate action plan for transportation infrastructure, which again is supposed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, invest more into multimodal options, which I'll get into that a little bit more once we go through the legislative platform. But the problem is there was a one-size-fits-all approach. I mean, we're not Los Angeles, we're not San Francisco, we don't quite have the same density as those areas, and so we need more pragmatic solutions to encourage mode shift and help people get to jobs, educational opportunities, and we're doing a lot in that regard. And so we gave the governor a couple suggestions here, and so he wound up vetoing the bill, wanting to work more closely with MPOs such as ourselves, the Central Coast, the San Joaquin Valley, other less densely populated areas. We did, I think it's really important, while our priority focus has been on trying to complete the 101 corridor, we are pretty vociferous in our support to how can we make transit more accessible, more viable within the county. And so we did support some legislation. 2622, it would have extended a sales tax exemption for the purchase of zero-emission buses, which MTD was a recent recipient of. 922 would have cut the red tape of CEQA in trying to provide more transit-friendly options, active transportation options, and we're talking about like traffic light synchronization, restriping of bike lanes, that sort of a thing, where you shouldn't have to go through a whole arduous, expensive process to do those types of things, complete streets types of projects. And then SB 942 was a big deal for us, and this is because the Low Carbon Transportation Operations Program, I won't get into acronyms, this is through the Cap and Trade Program. There's this pot of funding supplements transit operations in the state, and that legislation made it possible for it to supplement either providing free or reduced fares for public transportation. We already do that through our Measure A program, if I'm not mistaken, for funding the Clean Air Express. If I'm not, I'm wrong? Okay, I'm wrong. Local operators do. Okay, that's where I got that from. So, so that would help out MTD in particular in trying to encourage transit ridership. So that's a snapshot of legislation from last year. So on January 10th, Governor Newsom introduced his fiscal year 23-24 state budget, and just wanted to detail in as simple terms as I could for you just how volatile our state resources are. We literally play the stock market when we're financing our budget, and that's because we're heavily dependent upon capital gains, personal income tax, corporate taxes, and so you have a tremendous amount of volatility. So you see in fiscal year 1920, there was a $53 billion deficit. A lot of that was due to the onset of the pandemic. And then we had 2 years of unprecedented surplus funding, and now we're staring at a $22.5 billion deficit. The good news for transportation is that we're fairly insulated from the general fund, and that was a decision that was made by the legislature in 2009. So we're really dependent upon special funds, such as the gas tax, such as the imposition of a vehicle registration fee. And the state does have sufficient resources in the rainy day fund. They have $34.5 billion to cover the shortfall for one. And they made prudent decisions last year. The $97.5 billion because it was over the constitutional limit of what we could capture. They had to give it back to voters. And so there were a lot of one-time expenditures. So we didn't hamstring ourselves with ongoing commitments. So this deficit should be manageable, which to me, it's still a staggering number. And so there could be an opportunity in the budget here because the rainy day fund is at the hilt. There's about $950 million that the legislature has to spend on infrastructure. And so we're looking to see if we can exploit that opportunity to bring some additional revenues here to the county. Transit operations funding has been a hot topic of conversation. So in last year's budget, the fiscal year 22-23 budget, it's an AB 180. The legislature included intent language. So it wasn't a full guaranteed promise, but it was the intention of providing $4 billion, $2 billion over fiscal year 23-24, and 23-24, and then 25-26 for to supplement transit operations and some capital. The governor, because of the deficit, that was just low-hanging fruit. He's saying, hey, we really can't give you the money if the money doesn't exist, because this is one of the rare times that the state is actually going back and saying, we'll dedicate general fund money for transportation, because the priority for the legislature and for the administration is typically education, health and human services, public safety. Transportation is, further down the priority list, and we have our special funds. But it does contain a trigger where if revenues do recover by the release of the May revision, that the governor is looking at honoring, providing the additional supplemental funding to help out LoSan, MTD, other operators, local opera Santa Maria, other operators within the county. So that's something definitely to keep an eye on. Several properties have written letters to the governor urging him to find a solution to make good on that promise. So we'll keep you posted. Concurrent with the commencement of the new class of legislators when session commenced on December 5th, the governor did announce a special session to evaluate what he deems to be the price gouging at the pump. In the fall of last year, there was a precipitous climb in gas prices. He wants to investigate more. The concern for us here is that there's already legislation looking at repealing or suspending the gas tax, and if that happens, that's our lifeblood. So that would mean less money for local streets and roads, for maintenance of the state highway system, for us to receive funding through the State Transportation Improvement Program, which is one of the few flexible pots of money that the county receives in order to address, it could be active transportation, it could be mass transit, it could be anything on the 101, you name it. So that's something to definitely to keep an eye on. Next slide, please. So the Brown Act, heard a robust conversation earlier. I've got the good, the bad, the ugly here. We were fortunate that we got to work within the confines of AB 361, the governor's executive order, on the COVID pandemic. The state of emergency expires on February 28th. I did hear, and Don, I don't know if you did either, but Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra is asking governors to extend the state of emergency to allow states more of a ramp to be able to get back into, the pre-COVID mode, if you will, but there's been no action by our governor on this yet. So you could operate, assuming that there's a state of emergency, up until Jan 1, 2024. So this is a temporary solution. You could really only use this statutory allowance for the remainder of this year. Assembly member, it's going to be hard for me to transition. Assembly Member Hart is carrying legislation to extend AB 361. It's going to be sponsored by the California Special Districts Association. Don't have a bill number on that yet, but I'll be sure to report back once that happens. Our ideal solution would have been AB 1944, so no state of emergency declaration needed. All board meetings, if you would prefer, could have been held virtually. That bill did not make it through the legislative process. There were instances across the state where folks would beam in and they'd have others in the room. There were concerns about influences on decision-making. Folks weren't having their cameras on. So these were all arguments that were heard in testimony. So it was more about transparency and just accountability to the public. But, you know, it's really causing some consternation for folks for all the reasons that you articulated. But it's hard given someone's individual circumstance. The fact that there has been more public participation by offering a virtual medium as well. Some jurisdictions actually enjoyed that. So there will be multiple bills here. The League of Cities is looking at sponsoring a bill. There is a bill that's authored by a Southern California member. It's SB 411. And if your population was over 3 million, then you could enjoy the benefits of meeting virtually, but that's his threshold. It's because he represents the city of Los Angeles. So good for them if that makes it far. But so, and then you heard all about 2449. And so, yes, that bill is temporary, as the chair pointed out, because you only have the authority to do this and only for individual circumstances. And there's a 20% cap. So even if you met every month, individuals could only meet virtually twice, and that's it. So, so a lot more to come on this issue here, and we'll keep you posted. So with respect to your legislative platform, we've since added a 7th item, as Ms. Bianchi-Clement mentioned, and that's on housing. But our number one priority is always to try to leverage our Measure A dollars to try to get as much state and federal funding as possible. There's a ton of money that's come in. There's $40 billion of formulaic funding that the state is getting from the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We've got Senate Bill 1 funding, and that's $5.2 billion per year, and that's indexed, so it just increases per year. Leveraging regional partnerships, we work very well with the Central Coast Coalition, and Mr. Kachek and Director Kern helped steer that, along with myself and Maya Kokami as well. And so we've realized a lot of success, and our message has really resonated, and I'll get into this once we kind of go through the actual platform. Keeping multimodal options an option, transit funding challenges, I'll get into this too, just with Farebox. I kind of referred to the 2 Friedman bills and the governor's executive orders, and so just calibrating expectations here. And then expanding Coast Rail service. We don't really have Coast Rail. I mean, the rail that we have is more of a tourist, train, if you will. And we see how folks from Silicon Valley are moving more south into the coast, and there's a real appetite for having multimodal options. And there's more discretionary riders that would actually pay the fare along some of the most iconic shoreline in the world, and then getting our Brown Act together. So. Central Coast Coalition, as Lauren mentioned, so this is who comprises the Central Coast. So we have 6 members, but that's because AMBAG is separate. Some of the counties aren't one-stop shop as an MPO for handling things with respect to their sales tax measure. 4 out of the 5 counties in the coalition are self-help members, and then Caltrans is a participant there. And then this is the date, but I'm sorry, Lauren, I wanted to hop back to the platform, but just March 15th is the date that we're looking at. If you could queue up the actual thing. I'm sorry about that. So we try, with respect to your platform, to we have a red line version, and then we have a clean copy, just because it might be too much going on. But we, the way that we kind of set up the platform is we understand that this is a document as far as how we communicate with the public. with our delegation and other stakeholders. So we like to show what are our successes, what more can we improve on, and that's why there's a little bit more dialogue in here that's affiliated with our goal and then the strategy to achieve things. So number one, as far as acquiring state funding, there's a couple things to consider here. The because of the push to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, there's a lot of talk about converting over from the gas tax. And so we've kind of done that to a certain extent. And we played a prominent role through Director Kern's direction back in 2017 to introduce the notion of having the state consider a vehicle registration fee, because instead of doubling down on petroleum, which only is going to increase emissions, we said, what about having a revenue neutral conversion to a vehicle registration fee, which is progressive, so that it doesn't hurt disadvantaged communities that have to drive further. It accounts for electric vehicles. It goes down the longer that you own your car, because cars depreciate, so you wind up paying less if you own your car longer. But it's predictable, stable funding, and then it's more environmentally responsible, if you will. So there's a discussion going on right now about, do we have there's a road user task force that the CTC has commissioned to look at, do we switch over to a mileage-based user fee, which I'm concerned that might be regressive again for folks that have to drive further. There's discussion about just having that correlate to whatever people already pay with the gas tax. So there's much more to come, and I think we've definitely got to be at the table to see how this is going to play out with accessing funding and with the impact on our constituency. The Senate Bill 1 programs that we're applying for, we've been incredibly successful in acquiring money to leverage, again, our Measure A dollars to complete the 101 corridor, to acquire money for active transportation. Just this last round in December, cycle 6, the county received over $43 million worth of funding. City of Lompoc received an award. City of Santa Barbara received about $27 million. So Isla Vista even received an award. And so we've done really well. And to be quite honest, the region as a whole has really been the envy of the state, because we just know how to tell our story. And people are trying to figure out what our secret sauce is. And it's just, we're really good at working together and telling our narrative exactly. We're not leaking that one out. So we just want to be able to build upon those successes. And there's some opportunities where the Transportation Commission will issue recommendations on various programs that we've applied for, either June 8th or June 9th of this year. And so we want to be able to maintain our partnership with Caltrans and others to bring the project to completion. So that's really number one. Number two, on leveraging regional partnerships. Again, what we've been doing is, because of legislation where you may be collectively working with your colleagues in other counties on trying to address the housing crisis, we're working collectively on addressing broadband issues. We're working collectively on trying to build zero-emission vehicle options and infrastructure, especially along the 101 corridor. These are things that we work very closely with Caltrans and our sister MPOs along the region. So we want to maintain that. We've been acknowledged by the governor himself on, we were one of the first to implement this kind of thing into our platforms, and others are following suit. So we just want to build upon that. Enhancing transit service, just really briefly. I'm glad to hear Director Williams say that ridership's coming back. There are struggles, though, with folks meeting fare box statewide, and that's because transit, unfortunately, more discretionary riders are electing for other opportunities, so it's leaving society's most vulnerable to rely upon transit options. And so there has been relief that the state's provided for operators not to get penalized for making their fare box. That relief expires June 30th of this year. So we'll work with the California Transit Association, among others, in order to make sure that we find solutions to maintain, if not expand, transit service so that it's more workable for our constituents. Expanding passenger rail service, number 4. Very briefly there, I referenced there's really a 153-mile gap of service between Gilroy and where Caltrain terminates, and then where Losan terminates in San Luis Obispo. So Union Pacific is ready, willing, and able to talk to us about how we can help make it a reality to connect San Francisco to the Los Angeles basin. And so we continue to advocate before the California State Transportation Agency, among others, to try to make that a reality. One thing that we did in last year's budget that was pretty cool is Director Kern said there was some additional money in the state budget. Is $1 billion worth of funding that the state had that was unobligated. We asked that that be put towards earmarks. That they didn't want to do earmarks, and so we said, well, could you fund the program, keep it in transportation? They said yes, so it funded the Transit Capital and Intercity Rail program. And Goleta was a beneficiary of that in getting some station rehab work done. I think it was $5 million. So number 5, I talked a lot about addressing our state climate goals. It's just having more workable, solutions. I mean, if the state really wants us to address mobility, they should help us get the rail up and going. They should provide us with more pots of money, I guess, to be able to purchase, buses, so that we're not having to put the onus just on our local jurisdictions to do that. Maybe more frequency of van pool service, et cetera. Expediting broadband. I'm looking at, I should have an answer hopefully later today. Either Assemblymember Hart or Senator Lamone are going to author legislation on our behalf to allow us to access some of the local grants that are available for broadband implementation. So this is helping out with some of the last mile work where I guess the county's eligible, but not the MPO, yet we're the ones that are responsible for doing the sustainable community strategies planning. So this is something that I think would help us be able to achieve some of our reduction of vehicle miles traveled goals, improving air quality, et cetera. And then just the last 2 quick items. On the Brown Act, the legislation that I think the League of Cities is going to want to do is to codify the ability for those boards and commissions that are appointed instead of directly elected would be exempt from the Brown Act, especially the citizens advisory committees, so that there isn't a hardship on them to establish a quorum. And so we're waiting on a bill number there, and we'll keep you apprised. And then the last item, number 7, on housing. Our world's been expanding. We really haven't touched on housing much in the past, but it's becoming more of a reality with trying to look at strategies to create more transit-oriented development or access some of the state funds that are available through REAP 2.0. It's been a clunky process as far as when applications are due and when they hand out money and that kind of a thing. So trying to work with the California Association of Councils of Governments, among others, to try to streamline that. So I know I said a mouthful. I'll stop right there. Chair Osborne, I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you members may have.
Thank you. Director Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Osborne. Getting back to the Brown Act question, you said, so the League of Cities is looking to exempt from the Brown Act. That's broad. So can you be a little bit more specific? Is it complete exemption? Are these not going to be public meetings?
No, they're public meetings, and you have to provide a medium for the public to participate telephonically or visually. If the proceedings are interrupted, so let's say if an SBCAG meeting, if you had technical difficulties here, you would have to halt your proceedings until that was rectified before you could continue. You'd have to keep your camera on also if you were participating virtually. So there's safeguards that are in place, okay. But I have to see what the final introduced version is. But these are the discussions that we've been having or that we've been hearing about through our various affiliations with some of the statewide associations on what they want to introduce.
And since we're here with SBCAG, I assume SBCAG would be an appointed committee that would fall under those under that legislation.
Yeah, and then this also, just to make clear this point, it's also for our advisory committees, your staff who are pressed with time, your county planning staff, your county public works staff who have to travel to our advisory committee meetings. And so this is really also helping those bodies as well, because they're subject to the Brown Act.
Okay, thank you.
Director Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Krupp, I'm going back to the SB 922, the CEQA exemptions for all these. As we look through the menu of things that CEQA does and what it doesn't do, I'm starting to see such a double standard for a government regulation being suspended for government purposes. Is there any discussion on either reforming CEQA, changing CEQA, or it looks like a double standard for people that are trying to apply and it all of a sudden gets pulled off the mats for specific favored projects?
The short answer is you're correct. There is a double standard, and it's gamesmanship. And I think this isn't really a secret, but people like exploiting the process in order, if they don't like delivery of a certain project, they like delaying it, which adds more cost. And there's been legislation in the past to either shorten the comment period to a more reasonable standard. That bill hasn't really gone far. The governor's tried to nibble at it. But labor in particular, it's tough. It's leverage, for them on certain projects, and making sure that certain things are, embedded within a collective bargaining agreement or what have you. So we'll see what happens, but it's sort of been a third rail issue to go beyond. This has been progress, though. I'll say, especially for multimodal options, but it's usually on the highway side that we have the most difficulty.
Yeah, thank you. That's an honest answer. Appreciate that.
Of course.
Any questions from directors online?
Chair Osborne, I see no directors with their hands raised.
All right, Director Williams.
Well, I just, I don't normally insert the lobbying priorities of 3CE because the funding questions are related to our ability to meet our electrification goals that both bodies have. I think it's important to talk about some issues because most of the folks here are in 3C territory. So, as you might be aware, 3C has a considerable rate advantage on PG&E and a slight rate advantage on SCE. 90% of the revenue goes to purchase energy, 4.5% goes to programs like electrification. And one of the fiscal challenges we're having before us is because of several pieces of legislation and PUC decisions, including the midterm reliability mandate, which is a mandate on how much renewables need to be procured. But because there was a date in the midterm reliability, and 3CE, as well as a couple other entities, procured their renewables, large share of their renewables before that date, even though our amount of renewables are higher, a lot of them don't count. So we may get a penalty. And so I think there is going to be, I just want to let you know, there is going to be a real legislative effort to either change the date or to make previously procured renewables count, which would have a fiscal effect on our ability to do the electrification and goals in the long term. So I wanted to make it at least you aware of that's out there because it affects our ability to get all of this stuff done.
Right.
All right, seeing no additional questions, do we have any public comment?
Chair Osborne, we have no request for public comment.
All right, so we have to approve the platform, but then we also need to appoint at least one, if not two, delegates to attend the Advocacy Day on March 14th and March 15th.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Director Chair, we have one more addition for the platform for your consideration, so.
Okay.
My apologies.
Sure.
So one other item came to fruition after this was inserted, and it's pretty important. So because you're a self-help county, and so you're contributing to improving state assets, Caltrans, even though you're doing work on their asset, they charge you what's called an indirect cost rate for the privilege of doing work on the state highway system. It's the most bizarre thing. I can't fully comprehend or explain it, but the Self-Help Counties Coalition has carried legislation to extend placing a cap on what this cost is And so up until recently, it was a 10% cap. So whatever the project cost was, and we don't know what it goes for. It can pay for the lights at Caltrans, at Cal State. We don't know. It's not necessarily related to whatever the scope of a project is. It's just the most bizarre thing. But without the continuation of this legislation, you'll see your cost escalate, and some other counties are reporting, instead of 10%, they're paying a 27% figure. And so what I should have done, and my apologies for this, is to insert maybe a sentence in here just so I have some kind of direction from the board to assist the Self-Help Counties Coalition in extending that cap to save us some money. It would fall under item number 1 as far as, acquiring or protecting our funding. So ask you to humbly make a motion to accept the platform with that amendment. And then the second part is I need a couple volunteers for, or one at least, for March 15th.
All right, so why don't we take those in 2 steps, and we'll seek to approve the state legislative platform for 2023 with the requested amendment. Entertain a motion for that first, and then have a discussion about who will attend second. Do we support the platform?
So moved.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote for that.
Director Williams?
Aye.
Capps? Aye. Hartman?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Levanino? Aye. Infante?
Aye.
Julian?
Aye.
Oh, I see Director Patino has her hand raised.
That's for the next part.
Okay, sorry. Threw me off there. King?
Aye.
Patino?
Aye.
Perotti? Aye. Clark?
Aye.
Rouse?
Aye.
And Chair Osborne.
Aye.
Motion passes 13-0.
All right. All right, so now we need to have at least 1 volunteer, if not 2, to attend the Central Coast Coalition's Sacramento advocacy activities on Tuesday, March 14th and Wednesday, March 15th, because myself and Vice Chair Lavanino are unavailable. Director Patino, is that something you're raising your hand to volunteer for?
Well, maybe. I didn't know exactly what the time commitment was for that, because you said the 14th and the 15th.
15.
So,
Yeah, it is an overnight, and got a head nod from Gus.
Yeah, so the 14th, that Tuesday, is a travel date.
Okay.
And so the main activities are happening on that Wednesday.
on the 15th.
Okay.
Okay. And then are we coming back on the 15th, or we come back on the 16th?
15th.
The 15th, yeah.
Okay, because the 16th is SBCAG.
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair, we're usually done by, say, 2:30 or 3, and usually your delegation, if it's done, I think the appointment with Senator Lamone is at 1:30, so you'll be done probably by about 2 o'clock.
All right.
If you
So
had to catch a flight or something.
That
And
helps.
that's what I'm asking. Is it catching a flight, or is it driving?
Flight.
Okay. Okay, I will, I will go if somebody else doesn't want to go, because I am available at that time.
So we have 1 volunteer. Is there anyone else who would like to participate, because they have the availability for up to 2 of us? If there was anybody from South County that was interested or available? Anybody online? Other than Director Patino? All right, so we have the 1 volunteer that is volunteering to go. We appreciate that, Alice. All right, I will move that Director Patino attend on our behalf to the Advocacy Day, and may I get a second for that? All right, we have a second from Director King. Roll call vote, please.
Director Williams? Aye. Capps? Aye. Hartman? Nelson?
Aye.
Levanino? Aye. Infante? Aye. Julian?
Aye.
King?
Aye.
Patino?
Aye.
Perotti? Aye. Clark?
Aye.
Rouse?
Aye.
And Chair Osborne.
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0.
Joan Hartman is also indicating.
Oh, she is, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. 13-0.
All right, item 5D.
5D, 2023 Calvans Committee appointment. Appoint Director Nelson to serve as the primary member of the Cal Events Committee and appoint a new alternate.
All right, thank you, Director Nelson, for being willing to step up. I'm assuming.
Yes, so at the meeting in, I believe in January, when we did the appointments, I offered to be the alternate because Mayor Julian wasn't present at that meeting, and he's been a regular member in the past. And so him and I have spoken about it, and he has a lot of committee reassignments in the city of Guadalupe. So he'd be, at least the discussion we had, would he'd be willing to be the alternate member and let me be the regular member. I don't know if that's still true, but if it is, I'm glad to learn from his experience over the last couple years serving in that position. I did attend the meeting as the alternate along with the mayor, I think last week or the week before, and got a chance to get my feet wet a little bit. And I think because of the area of our county that I represent and some of the other rural interests that I am engaged in, I think my presence on that committee will bring a great benefit to our region.
Thank you. Director Julian, would you still like to serve as alternate?
I do, and I really appreciate Supervisor Nelson for stepping in. There's a lot going on in this area, and I'll be glad to still remain visual in terms of what's going on in this community and support Supervisor Nelson. So thank you, Supervisor.
All right. Well, that makes that easier, unless somebody wanted to fight over this. All right. So the motion is to appoint Director Nelson as the primary member of the Cal Vans Committee and allow Director Julian to serve as the alternate. All right. Director Perotti, do I have a second? And Director Infante seconded that. Roll call vote, please.
Director Williams. Aye. Capps. Aye. Hartman.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Levanino. Infante. Aye. Julian.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Patino.
Aye.
Perotti.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Rouse.
Aye.
And Chair Osborne.
Aye.
Motion passes 13-0.
So I want to take a quick step back to item 5A. I remember that we did do a motion to approve methodology, but I don't believe that it included approving the calendar. Would you like that to be formalized? Because the motion was just for the option of how we were meeting and did not include approving the calendar.
We need the
Yes,
calendar
that's what I
approved.
figured. All right,
Yes.
so I will entertain a
Thank you.
motion to approve the calendar.
Move approval of the calendar.
Second.
All right, thank you. And roll call vote for that, please.
Okay, we have Williams.
Aye.
Capps. Hartman.
Aye.
Nelson. Levanino. Infante. Julian.
Aye.
King.
Aye.
Patino.
Aye.
Perotti. Clark.
Aye.
Rouse.
Aye.
And Chair Osborne.
Aye.
13, motion passes 13-0. Okay, so who
Awesome.
made the motion? Who made the second? Well, wait
It was Williams and Nelson.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, bat and cleanup here on my meeting. Let's see, 1 minute reports. Would anybody like to, was that Director Rouse or, and Director Perotti? Okay, so we'll go Director Rouse first.
Yes, this week, Santa Barbara City Council approved the pavement maintenance 22B contract with pavement maintenance planned on Haley, Chapala, Garden, and Olive Street. As part of the pavement maintenance project, the MoDOC multi-use plan extension project will be constructed this spring. That path ties directly into the recently constructed MoDOC Las Positas multi-use path in the city and to the county's MoDOC multi-use path that is currently under construction. The MoDOC multi-use path extension project is being funded with Measure A grant funds and Measure C city funds, and that's all.
Director Perotti.
Thank you, Chair. Couple things. Just wanted to mention that our Goleta Valley Library will be celebrating its 50th birthday, and we're having a grand celebration. If anybody's in town and would like to come and visit, it's on March the 11th from 2 to 4. I'd also like to let you know that the Echo Fowler Road Extension Project will be up for discussion this coming Tuesday, and it's a perfect time to be bringing it up again. It's all on our minds, the council and staff, but we really need to be highlighting this project for the educational purposes of the community. We know what's going on, but they may not know it's coming. So and it's going to be a big project. So it's going to the council for discussion and authorization of a professional, the manager to authorize a professional service agreement. The city project and Hollister Avenue Bridge project are two projects, and they're locked together, located in Old Town, and has been in discussion for a number of years. Ethel Fowler project will improve access to and circulation within Old Town, and improve access to Santa Barbara Airport, enhance pedestrian and bicycle circulation and safety, and allow the expansion of transit opportunities within Old Town. This was funded through the State Transportation Improvement Program and local funds. Let's see. So the construction will begin summer of 2023 with the completion of spring 2026. And that's all I have.
All right. On this end, Director Capps?
Thank you, Chair Osborne. I just wanted to give a little tiny 1-minute report on related to our housing element discussion that we had a really healthy conversation. And in that, I shared some statistics about commuting, and I thought they might be helpful here, and I've put out a call for any other information. So just my team's research has discovered that our county employees, over a third, don't live in the county, and our city of Santa Barbara here, over 50% don't live in the city. Santa Barbara Unified, about 20% don't live in that district. I believe city of Goleta, only 28% live in the city. So I'm just interested in this kind of information. If you all have it and would like to share it with me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Is this Director Williams or Director Lamanino?
Well, we could do both. We could maybe just alternate words. Go ahead. Just wanted to report on, I think I've alluded to this before, but Supervisor Hartman and myself 2 years ago initiated an electric vehicle mandate on the county. And this week, the board, thank you to all board members.
I will interrupt. I did vote for that. So we're going to go back and forth.
Yeah. Supervisor Lavignino did vote for that visionary policy, and since then it's been updated twice, and the most recent update was this Tuesday. There are now 90 all-electric vehicles in the fleet, 90, and 130-something electric chargers, with another about 170 planned before 2026, so that would be over 300. Most of those are available to the public as well. They're not all in lots that are inaccessible to the public, and even those ones that are inaccessible are usually accessible after hours. And 4 electric trucks on order. And part of this was, I think, facilitated by really giving our general services a mission and a mandate, and they've implemented it really with alacrity. And the other part is we pursued funding from 3CE to make sure that that was possible, and that has been a significant help in achieving it.
Any director reports online?
Director Julian has his hand raised.
Director Julian?
Yes, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the county, thank the directors here, some of the city councilmen, people, and a whole slew of people, especially the county of Santa Barbara staff, social services, the Swift Water Rescue. There was 46 people, family members that were involved in that flood. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. All of the residents now have either temporary housing or permanent housing as a result of working with the Santa Barbara County Housing Authority. And this coming Saturday, we're having a benefit barbecue. Some of you all know about that, from basically 10:30 to 4 o'clock at Leroy Park. And we are very thankful. The city was very thankful before FEMA came in. County of Santa Barbara, the emergency management crew met with our city staff. They were out, as one may know, that there was a family that was out stranded on a little island, and they helicoptered them out. That one person was in a wheelchair. So just my kudos to the Santa Barbara County staff, Santa Barbara County supervisors, and you all, city officials, ask or actually lend a hand in terms of what do you need. And the city is very thankful for that, reaching out before the major entities came in. So we extend our thanks to all of you for giving this little town a hand. So thank you.
Thank you, all. I think that's when it shows that we are one county, is when one of us needs the help, we reach out and we support. So continue to let us know what you need, Director Julian, so that we can strive to support you in that and the recovery. I want to thank Congressman Carbajal via Jesse Abadi. Please let him know how much I appreciated him calling the Vandenberg Space Force Housing Roundtable yesterday. I thank Director Hartman and Director Nelson for attending. It's an important discussion to realize the amount of people commuting to the base, the impact of the lack of housing close to the base is having on our two counties, both San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara County. So just thank you for that. It was an important discussion, and I hope to see it continue and we see some solutions that will improve quality of life and reduce the commute and greenhouse gases that are going on for that. Director Nelson.
If I could piggyback on Chairwoman and Mayor Osborne's comments about the Vandenberg Space Force Space forum that we had in the housing issues. We realized a lot of these issues are regional. And so one of the things that came out of that was we're going to at least start working on 2 subgroups within maybe the Lompoc Valley and the Santa Maria Valley to address some of the concerns that are preventing housing to being constructed. And one of the ideas that we're talking about is getting SBCAG potentially involved to deal with some of these special problem issues. And so hopefully that's something we can address in the future as maybe an item about how to further utilize SBCAG at solving some of our regional problems. So just want to float that out there.
Yeah, you did such a good job with broadband. Be careful. Be careful what you ask for. You guys did a great job, and it's really shown that this organization can have some of the tough discussions and come away with great solutions and benefits, as well as dealing with some of the issues that we have. So thank you for that great leadership. Your team has really proven their ability to do that. You're small and mighty, and yes, people do know who you are. So thank you for that. That being said, I'll hand it over to you, Executive Director Kern, to...
Sure. Thank you for that. Thank you. I did want to let the board know that I have been invited to some of these discussions, and I am representing SBCAG in those arenas. And I feel a little uncomfortable about that because it's not in our bailiwick. Housing is not our main mission. So I do want to have that discussion with you all to make sure that I'm representing you well and representing your goals and interests in this discussion and not going outside of my purview. And I'm more than happy to do this. And I think what I've been trying to establish with this organization is you all are a very powerful organization by sitting here all together and having this camaraderie and discussions and intentions, and can be even more intentional in your decision making and how you go about doing your business. So I welcome these opportunities, and I want to make sure that I'm not going beyond what you would like me to do. So with that, I'm getting a feeling that you're okay with what I'm doing, and until I hear otherwise, I will continue to do what I'm doing. So thank you. I do want to let the board know that we are restoring transit service for the Clean Air Express. There is a route that's been in demand from Santa Maria to Santa Barbara that we cut during the pandemic because of ridership and the lack of thereof. But this will restore a trip that will also connect to Santa Maria, Buellton, and downtown Santa Barbara. It's the earlier morning trip. So it's about an hour earlier than what is currently established. We only have 1 trip. Now we'll have 2 starting on March 1st. And that schedule will be publicized and advertised to those riders, which I'm sure that they'll be thankful that that's being reestablished. I do have to give a plug for our Santa Barbara County Association of Governments was awarded a I always mess up this acronym. Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program Grant for the Goleta Train Station. This was a joint application with the city of Goleta. We did, the original application was in 2018, if I recall correctly. The original amount was 13 million. We asked for another 5.6 million, and we were awarded that a couple weeks ago. And I want to thank the city for leveraging. They actually put in another $1 million into the grant that made that subsequent amount awarded to us because of that leveraging. I do want to let you know that we met with our the Central Coast Coalition, which you heard about earlier. We met with our newest Transportation Commission member, Commissioner Lugo, and she was very animated about her experience and where she comes from, and I think she's going to be a great member of the commission, and it was really nice to establish that relationship with her and get to know her better, and to introduce the Central Coast and the coalition to her as well. So it was a great meeting, and we look forward to a productive relationship moving forward. But I do want to do another plug, is we still do not have a representative on the California Transportation Commission from the Central Coast, and that's been one of my missions and my goals, is to have somebody appointed when there are vacancies. And so we've tried a couple times, and we had a little snafus here and there, but I think it is in our best interest to have a representative that represents our area on that very important decision-making body, and I will continue to pursue people who are willing to take that on, because it is getting appointed is a challenging process. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair, and I'll turn off my mic. Thank you.
Any questions for the executive director before we move on? All right, thank you. Caltrans Director's Report.
All right. Thank you, Chair Osborne, members of the board. Pleasure to be here today. Scott Eads. I have a few things to update you on. I want to start with a road closure update. We're making progress. As we all know, there was some significant closures related to the recent storms. So just some brief updates on that. Highway 150, it's now open. There are a few areas where we have one lane traffic control in each direction with alternating traffic, so do expect some travel delays, but it is passable now. Highway 217, it's open now for traffic, but keep in mind that work is set to begin on the San Jose Creek Bridge replacement project in April. So there'll be more information forthcoming on that. There will be some lane closures as part of that, and we'll provide details once we have them. Highway 101, fully open, of course. In Gaviota, we still have the number 2 lane closed near the tunnel. We're installing rock netting, and rock drapery is also being installed to address the slide activity at that location and try to prevent future slides. We expect that work to wrap up within the next month. And then Highway 1, we still have some pretty significant closures on the Big Sur coast. We have just extended one of the slides was just south of Ragged Point. We were able to open that location again with some traffic control at that location. So now we are beyond the Ragged Point area up into Mill Creek. There's still a roughly 9-mile stretch that is closed. So just be aware of that fact, that you cannot get through to Monterey by taking Highway 1, but you can access much of Big Sur one direction or the other. Want to highlight 2 grant programs. We've talked about these in the past, but just kind of an update. The Clean California Local Grant Program, this is cycle 2. There's approximately $100 million available statewide. They just released on Valentine's Day program materials with guidelines, applications, and instructions. They're all posted online, and workshops are being planned. They're intending to have 2 or 3 workshops at this point in time. In the coming weeks, those will be announced, and the applications are due on April 28th at exactly 5 p.m. or before. And more information can be found at cleanca.localgrant@dot.ca.gov. And I can certainly send links to anyone if you're interested. Last thing that I wanted to highlight, and we've talked about this in the past as well, is the Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grants. Those are due, applications are due on March 9th. There have been a few workshops already on that subject. There's nearly $85 million available statewide in 3 different grant categories. Certainly encourage you and your staff to look at that and see if there's interest in that program. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Director Williams.
Just want to know about expected opening of the 33, which is a issue for Cuyama constituents, 33 between Cuyama and Ojai.
I should have that information, and don't let me look to other things that I might have here in my information. If I can't find it while there's other questions, then I'll get back to you on that, Supervisor Williams.
And Director Hartman.
Yes, thank you, Chair Osborne. I have 2 questions. The first is about the 101 Gaviota Wildlife Corridor and the status of that study. And then I have another question after that.
Okay, through the chair, Director Hartman, my understanding is the study is proceeding, and I do not know exactly where it's at right now, but I know that we are working with local stakeholders, and that we're gathering information. So I'm not certain of the exact, like, where we are in terms of completion on that. But again, I can follow up and with you.
That would be
directly on that.
terrific. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
The other question is one I don't expect an answer to, but I do think it's an important one to raise. And that is with the housing element under the RENA program. We are having to rezone to accommodate a lot more housing, and this is going to have impacts on your roads. And how do we initiate discussions earlier rather than later about how to deal with these increased traffic demands that we're all going to face together?
That is a terrific question. And really, I would say this is an important reason why SBCAG exists, to really think about the long-term plan, how the land uses fit with transportation, and the relationship between those things. And the travel forecasting model helps in that respect as well. So I think it should be handled in the context of the regional transportation plan. We're certainly interested in talking about it corridor by corridor. Caltrans has its own planning processes as well. But to the degree that we're concerned about specific links or corridors, we're really interested in working together with SBCAG staff and the board in terms of making sure that we're initiating the right planning efforts and thinking ahead about the future. Because you're absolutely right that the RENA allocations, this is not just of course, it's happening statewide. The RENA allocations are forcing land uses to change and intensify at the same time. We're being asked to reduce vehicle miles of travel. So these are not necessary. There's not necessarily easy solutions to all this. And it does need to happen in terms of a planning context and working together to try to make sense of what is the best solutions location by location.
Well, we're talking to our state delegation about some of the impacts, but I would really like to know in more detail, and perhaps at our next meeting, exactly how we launch this discussion and get incorporated in your regional planning efforts for Caltrans.
Happy to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Director Julian.
Thank you. On regarding ADA pedestrian infrastructure improvements on Highway 1 from Santa Maria River to 166, we have a petition that's been circulated locally regarding the current design plan, and we need to really follow up on that because we've got a whole bunch of folks that aren't totally happy with what responses that we're getting from Caltrans. So I can note you later on, but we need to see where we can go and make everybody happy, or try to. This is it's the summer of 2025, and it's a $12.9 million project, and it needs to go well. So I just wanted to put that in somebody's placeholder.
Director Julian, through the chair. Yes, we have a lot going on in Guadalupe
Yes.
in terms of some of our shop projects and local development efforts and your own city efforts. We're eager to work together on that. I know there has been back and forth between our permitting office and our traffic office and some of your staff. So yeah, I'd be interested in talking with you directly on that, just to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of priorities and needs that are upcoming in your community.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll reach out to you directly. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, seeing no one else's light on and no online.
Director Osborne, if I could,
Sure.
I did receive an update. Highway 33 is closed. We do not have a reopening time at this point. So it's closed for the time being, but we'll certainly be providing updates as we have them.
All right, thank you for getting that information for us. All right, item number 9, committee meetings, Calvan's board meeting report for February 9th, 2023. Director Nelson?
Yes, as mentioned before, I attended my first Calvan's meeting, and I'm still trying to get my feet wet. There were some discussions about electrification of some of the vans. That still is somewhat problematic for that size. There's not a product out there that's meeting that. There's a lot of kits and conversions that they're trying to do, but the cost is making it prohibitive at this point. So it's something that's being evaluated and will continue to be evaluated by the Calvan's group. Further, we're going to look at having them maybe do a presentation on what's going on specifically in the Santa Maria Valley and northern Santa Barbara County, so that we can better understand and make sure that we're properly utilizing our participation in Calvan's.
Thank you for that. All right, thank you all for participating today, and we will adjourn until the next meeting on March 16th, 2023.